Shana Tova, everyone. I know this is a bit strange. It's strange for me, as I'm sure it's strange for you. But given the parameters of this year's experience, we wanted to try pre-recording the Torah and Haftorah readings for today and tomorrow and Yom Kippur. And the thinking was that this way you can actually have the choice of when you want to engage with the Torah reading and the Haftorah reading in this way. You can do it at the time in the service that it comes up, or you can do it on your own time, and that way you can manage your own sense of attention span on Zoom, and the experience can be most meaningful for you. And believe me, how I yearn for all of us to be together and reading Torah in the community in real time. Let me address for just a moment the question of why we would even do this if we don't have a minyan here. And I've been moved for a long time by a commentary that the rabbis make in the Talmud about reading from a Torah scroll. And they say it's akin to Moses, to God giving Moses the Torah at Mount Sinai. And of course, we don't have the volcanic activity and the words coming out like thunder and lightning from the mountain, but we do have this sense of reading from the scroll without vowels, without the aid of punctuation or tropes or other aids that help us chant from this text. And there's a kind of transmission that occurs, even if it's only the transmission of one person to another through the scroll as we've had it for 2,000 years, that's deeply moving. And so even though we're not all together, even though we could easily do this out of a book, there's something about doing it out of the scroll that's deeply meaningful to me. I'm going to, even though we're not together and reading in the traditional manner, I'm going to read this somewhat on the model of how we would typically do it, which is that since today is Shabbat and tomorrow is second day of Rosh Hashanah, today I'm going to read the Torah portion as it would be traditionally divided into 7 readings. And even though we won't have the aliyot, we can at least have that pause to take in what we've just read, and I'll provide some commentary in between as well to alert you to details in the text, maybe some you don't know about and some you've never thought about before. Let me tell you a little bit about today's reading. This story and tomorrow's story is deeply confounding, deeply broken, and yet at the same time, I think points us to deeper wholeness and almost infinite layers of meaning. And today we actually have 2 stories. The first is about Avraham and Sarah, as Isaac is born, the miracle baby, born to Sarah at 90 and to Avraham at 100. But of course, the family have Hagar, and they have a son, Ishmael, who's sort of all of their son. But as soon as Isaac is born, the family begins to rupture. There are ruptures there already, but now they fully rip open. And Sarah demands from Avraham that he banish Ishmael and Hagar, which would mean near certain death in the wilderness. And we see a new Avraham here. Instead of being the one who protests against God for justice for all humanity, he can't act. He doesn't know what to do. And so at God's behest, he actually listens to Sarah and banishes Hagar and Ishmael. And that's when the story really takes on its depth, because God listens to Ishmael at the point where he's closest to death in the wilderness. And he provides, and rather God, it's fine, I usually don't refer to God as he, but somehow it slipped in. But God provides a well, and he provides the promise to Hagar and Ishmael that they too will have a great destiny, just like Avraham and Sarah. I'll say more about that later. The second story presents a different Avraham than we've seen in the first story. In the second story, Avraham has an argument with Avimelech. Avraham dug wells and Avimelech's servants stole them. I'll talk about that more just a little bit later. And in place of being not knowing what to do and arguing, Avraham actually comes up with a covenant with Avimelech, and they settle their conflict, and he dwells in peace, a kind of peace that eludes him within his own family. So I'll have a little bit more to say about that later. I hope that's something you find interesting to think about. And now we'll start with the Torah reading for the first day, which is on page 100 in the Lev Shalem Machzor.